Coming up on Currently, changes are coming to Traverse City, from new plans for the West End and two-way downtown streets to the future of Hickory Hills. Plus, a closer look at Garfield Township and data centers. All that and more ahead on Currently. Welcome to Currently, where we discuss some of the top local stories directly from the journalists who are covering them, and I'm your host, Crystal Frost. This podcast was recorded on Thursday, July 23rd, and the Tigers are 48-54 in the AL Central. Meanwhile, your Traverse City Pittsburghers are 33-21, first in the Great Lakes East. Support for Currently comes from West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you are not just choosing a bank, you are choosing a partner committed to the well-being of our community, and you can visit them today on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. Welcome to Beth Milligan, head writer for the Traverse City Ticker. It's us again, Beth. We're here.
We're back.
We did it. We're back. I love it that we are talking news again.
Yeah.
Love talking about news.
It doesn't seem to slow down.
It doesn't seem to slow down. I'm excited about talking about the Garfield Township and the data. What do I say?
I think you say both. Tomato,
like tomato.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone who says tomato?
No, to be honest.
Well, I don't know. Tell me if it's data. I want to say data.
See, I always say data.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm sure there'll be some people
data
with
centers.
opinions
Listening. That's a whole thing. But we're going to talk about that in the second half of the show. Kicking things off, we're going to talk about the city news and those West End proposals. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so the West End proposals are for 6 city properties on State and Pine Streets. These are properties that the city had acquired over several years. They spent a little over about $7.6 million to acquire these, but the idea, when we talked, in the show previously about this, been discussed for years and years, the idea of building a third downtown parking deck.
A third parking garage,
yes. And the DDA, the Traverse City Downtown Development Authority, had gotten pretty far in the process of designing that parking deck, which was also proposed to include kind of a mixed-use development that would have retail space, workforce housing. It's a very large site down there. They got far into that process and then ultimately decided to scrap the project from the tax increment financing plan, the new one that they're working on, because they were concerned it lacked community support.
Is there any evidence to that?
I mean, I think there was a fair amount of discussion and feedback that the board had gotten over, multiple public hearings and input sessions on the TIF plan. It was not unanimous, though, when they decided to take it out. And some of the board members felt, the DDA has been promising to add more parking for years, particularly because part of the strategy downtown has been to redevelop some of the surface parking lots. So some of that parking has been going away. There's more of a crunch for parking now because of that, with the idea that the spaces would instead be consolidated in a multi-level deck.
Okay.
So without that deck, some of the business owners downtown felt like, they were building developments with the understanding that they thought there would be more parking on the West End. One of those builders is John Sox.
Yeah.
He has that loop development that's going up on West Front Street, kind of across from where the Record Eagle used to be. And so, he was relying, he's got a lot of housing, residential units in that building for the new deck to come online. So he actually in December came to the city commission and proposed partnering with the city to revive the project to help make it happen.
So have it be public and private,
A public-private partnership. His proposal was essentially, if they would sort of give the land to Sox Company, they would offer multiple public benefits. They would develop it. They would take on the construction costs and risk. They would help manage it for public parking. And then there would also be these other components, the workforce housing, the retail.
Oh, okay.
But the city manager pointed out that rather than just take the first proposal that came to the board, the typical process for the city for anything that is of value or has an expensive contract attached to it, for example, typically would go out to bid.
Yeah, I mean, that's the process. Even though this was John Sox's idea,
yes,
you still have to follow the rules, right?
Yes, and this happens often in the city, and it's sometimes a frustration for people who come up with ideas to work with the city because they feel like, well, I put the time into making this proposal, I thought of it, but because it's using taxpayer resources, you do typically put those out to bid, and so the city this spring issued a request for proposals. And they outlined the things that they were looking for. So they were essentially saying, we'd like to find a developer who might want to team up with the city to develop these 6 properties.
Okay.
We are looking for some key things in them. We do want to have public parking in it.
Right.
We do want to have rental housing, ideally rental housing that's targeted towards the workforce, income restrictions on it. So not just market rate, condos. They would like to have public restrooms, especially with Rotary Square coming online in the next year or so. The Traverse City Police Department on one of the properties has established a substation, a little outpost office essentially downtown. So they would like to include a substation in the project. They also wanted to have a ban on any short-term rentals in the development because they're trying to encourage longer-term housing. And they wanted it to align with the city's strategic action plan and its building electrification policy, which says buildings should be electrified whenever possible.
Okay.
So kind of a long list of criteria that were in the scoring rubric.
Yeah.
But it's also, a lot of valuable land. It's a big development, so that's what they were looking for. So those proposals came in. There were two major proposals that came in. 3 had been submitted, but Benjamin Maritat told me 1 didn't meet the criteria.
Okay.
So 2 that qualify. The first is John Sachs.
Okay.
So he came back with his company Shore North Development, and he's partnering with another major downtown development player, Great Lakes Capital, who has done some of the buildings like the building where Mundo's Coffee is. He's also developing the hotel that is going to go into the hole in the ground next to the Record Eagle, which is a Hilton. So they are, working together on this proposal, and they have met, the criteria. So both proposals. The other one is from a group called Endeavor, which has multiple Traverse City partners involved, including Homestretch and Kuhn Rogers, which is a local law firm, and Spence Brothers, a construction firm. Both of them meet the criteria. So they all have public parking as part of it. The Sox proposal has quite a bit more public parking proposed, about 534 spaces. Endeavor's is 365. They both have rental housing. The Sox proposal has more. They have 90 units proposed. The other one has 56 units. They are targeted in the workforce income range. They both have the public restrooms. They both have the substation. They both have ground floor commercial real estate for retail, some shops or something like that. So it's really what it's going to come down to is, commissioners are going to discuss this at their August 10th study session.
Okay.
So they will be looking at both proposals. The purchase price that the developers are offering is still up for negotiation. So John Sachs, his company, has said, we're going to be offering a lot of public benefits with this. We're sort of taking a hit developing below market rate housing and maintaining a parking garage. They would sort of like essentially the property be gifted. But they did say they're open to lease terms or purchase terms. Same thing for Endeavor. They had listed some pricing. The main difference with Endeavor's proposal is that they are also trying to bundle in Lot O, which is the parking lot on the corner of State and Cass next to Omelet Shop.
And that was something that Homestretch was looking for.
And that's because Homestretch is a partner on the Endeavor proposal. So Homestretch had a deal for that parking lot to build workforce housing in a grocery market on the ground floor there.
I remember this.
They couldn't get their funding together, so they kept missing deadlines with the city to get that deal finalized. And in January, the city commission essentially put it on hold. They just said, it seems like you're having a hard time with the funding. We're not going to keep going through this rigmarole. We're just going to leave it for parking for now. Maybe we'll come back and do another request for proposals in the future.
Okay.
So Endeavor and Homestretch and this partnership team are proposing not only to build the whole parking deck property, but also to develop Lot O. I will say that when I spoke to Benjamin Maritat, he is recommending that the city commission not consider those and separate Lot O so it can be its own property because it wasn't included in the West End RFP. He's trying to keep it fair. But regardless, the board will discuss these on August 10th. If they like one more than the other, they can tell staff that, and then staff can begin to negotiate with the contract that would ultimately come back for approval.
Yeah, because in reality, the Sox proposal could have included Lotto as well.
Right.
I mean, so that was just sort of added value, but that's going to be removed.
Yeah, I think that's a recommendation. Okay. I mean, the city commission will see that they can do what they want. They can see the proposals and decide. But the other thing, all of the terms of this will have to be negotiated. The city is going to have to decide, does it want to just outright sell its 6 properties and let them kind of like they'll create the terms of what the sale is and it's required to be parking or required to be housing, or they could retain ownership and the development partners would either be lessees or co-owners or just manage the development of the project. Like all of this is still on the table.
This is big.
Yeah, it's a very large, and both proposals, I would just say, acknowledge that calling it it's a very significant development opportunity for the west side of downtown.
Do you think that, with the Sox proposal having more units, even though I think there was something in your story that they were up to 100 to 120% AMI for like 22 of those units, and then 68 would be income deed restricted under 100% versus the Endeavor, which was like between 60 and 80%. Am I right on that?
So that was a little complicated because LAO getting involved. LAO had a lower AMI, like a 65%. And then the other ones on the west end would be 80 to 100, a blend.
Okay.
And John Sock's proposal had 22 market rate and then 68 income restricted under 100% AMI.
So more units, but the same AMI.
And he also offered in the Loop, his project next door, he offered to convert 60 of those units from short-term rentals to deed-restricted workforce housing.
Oh, wow.
As part of this package. So both proposals sort of look at other parcels and envision sort of a package deal.
Yeah.
He already has that project under construction, so he is sort of like throwing that in as a bone to continue the partnership outside of just the project boundaries. But again, this is all up to commissioners and a lot to be negotiated and decided.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. That's kind of a sweetener.
Yeah. So I would say that's probably a good way to describe
Especially if you're like 60 units that would be
short-term
rentals. And it's already zoned for that. They can already be short. Ooh.
Yeah, downtown. So we'll see. So lots of discussion to come.
I don't know. I mean, but who knows? Endeavor might be like, and I will also throw in my firstborn son. Right. Like it sounds like people really want this property. So what happens next? They're going to be looking
August
at this?
10th would be the meeting to keep an eye on. That'll be a study session, so they won't be taking any formal action that night, but they could give staff direction. They could say we like one proposal more than the other, and then staff would go into a due diligence period, which takes a couple months typically, where they're working out a contract that has to come back for a formal vote.
And it should be noted, too, all of these developers, I mean, they have roots here in Traverse City already. They have
they're both
projects.
Traverse City-based, development teams.
Yeah, so that's okay. That's big news. We will keep you posted on that. Let's stay downtown and talk about the two-way streets. Here to stay?
So this is a busy commission agenda meeting this week. So we'll just do a couple quick updates that also happened on downtown. The two-way streets are here to stay. It was a close vote. There was a 4-3 vote on Monday to keep the traffic pattern on State Street, Pine Street, and Boardman Avenue permanent. So there was some division about this. I will say, a lot of the discussion and some of the reason for the division was, I think we've talked on the show before about this, the two-way traffic pattern. Now, that pattern has been supported by the DDA board, by 2 different consultants who work in traffic engineering, also by the city's Complete Streets Advisory Committee. All of those different entities supported keeping a two-way pattern, so there was some significant support for it. Some residents have also really not liked it, particularly because of the backups at the intersections with challenges with turning. So under the two-way, making the two-way permanent, there will be likely improvements that will be coming. They will be looking at those intersections. There's possibilities for changing either the signals or the lanes or the way that they're laid out to deal with some of those turning issues that I think we've all experienced.
Right.
And also potentially they're looking at some other things like changing parts of Front Street. I want to be clear, not all of Front Street, but parts of Front Street, like between Pine and Union and between Park and Boardman to two-way, so that would help that circulation flow of the two-way traffic. We're not talking about the main blocks of Front Street. There is a possibility in the future that the city could look at the main blocks of Front Street, but that would be a whole other process.
It's too much change.
I think there's some understanding that maybe that's a lot of change, and Mayor Amy Shamrow pointed that on Monday, that is a possibility to be studied in the future, but it is not part of what's happening now.
Okay.
It's just the streets that we have two-way right now.
Okay. And I mean, this was obviously a close vote. if you want to start up an interesting conversation with literally any local stranger, ask them how they feel about the two-way streets.
And you won't get a clear answer. I saw a lot in our comment sections that some people feel like the city, it was ignoring the voice of residents by keeping it two-way because they supported one way. But I have interviewed people, I have seen reports from and surveys from downtown business owners. I would say it's not unanimous either way. Mm-hmm. Some people really like the two-way pattern. They feel it's safer. They feel like it's easier to get around downtown. I do know others hate it. Others feel like the turning is a nightmare. So I think quite fairly, either way, there would have been supporters or detractors.
Right. Yeah. Now, I saw a comment that there weren't a lot of people who showed up in favor or, in support of or in, people who didn't want it at the meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't a lot of public comment,
there wasn't.
period.
There was a lot of commission discussion.
Yeah.
And I will just say, I know we don't mind that people are very active commenting on the Ticker Facebook page, but that's not an official public record for the city commission. So even if you can't make meetings, which is understandable, some people have work or family, send an email. All of the commission's contact information is on the city website, and those do get, I know commissioners do look at those. Doesn't mean that a commissioner is always going to vote the way that you want them to. Just keep in mind other people are advocating for them to do the exact opposite. Yeah. But I know that they do read them. So
that's good to know. What else is happening in the city?
Yeah, so we have the TIF proposal. It's going to be on the ballot this fall. So the first time that a TIF plan is going to go to a vote in Traverse City. That's because of the city charter change that our voters made a few years ago that now require any TIF plans to go to a public vote. The commissioners did approve on Monday putting that ballot language. They are required under the charter change. They have to put this TIF plan on the ballot. So it's not about them supporting the TIF plan or not. They can't block it from going on the ballot. Okay. It's called a ministerial function. It's something that they are compelled to do. But they do have some leeway over what the language of the ballot proposal is. Okay. And that took a few weeks to get sorted out. They were trying to figure out how best to estimate what the tax capture is going to be. They were trying to figure out, there's a split now of revenue in the TIF plan. 70% is going to the DDA. The other 30% is going to places like the city, the Grand Traverse County, Beta, NMC. They were trying to get that language right. So they have finalized the language. We have more descriptions of that if you'd like to read it in the Ticker story. And then, of course, the ballot language will be on the city website as well.
All right. Any idea, like just talking to people, perusing comments, how people feel about the TIF plan already?
Well, people definitely have opinions about TIF quite strongly in any story that we do about TIF. So it will be interesting to see how it fares this fall. Again, this is the first time we're the only community in Michigan who has changed its charter to require a vote on TIF plans. So this is sort of uncharted waters. It's taken a while to even figure out the process for doing this because we just don't typically do this in Michigan. So it will be interesting to see how it goes. And I do think it was probably smart to separate even 70-30 because, I think people might go, well, I do like the idea of, 30% going to these areas, even if I myself don't support maybe the downtown aspect of it. I don't know. Yeah, they're trying to, the thing with the ballot language is you want to give enough information to voters where they understand the proposal without appearing to influence them one way or the other. Yeah. So it's tricky.
That is tricky, as Run DMC would say. Absolutely. It is tricky.
And the last thing before we go to the break, just to quickly mention, since we talked about Hickory up front, the last thing with the city this week is the city did agree to hire an outside company just for the next year to operate Hickory Hills. So it remains a city-owned ski park and property, but this group, the North Country Alpine Services, will be helping the city run the park. They're hoping to use this company, which has expertise in ski hills, to increase the programming, get the revenues up, and make that property a little more revenue positive for the city.
Well, that sounds like a good idea.
So we'll see how it goes. It's just a year to test it out and see how the partnership works.
Yeah, I like it. Coming up, we're going to talk about data centers in Garfield Township. That Beth has that story coming up. But first, a quick word from our lead supporter, West Shore Bank. Let me ask you something. I don't know why I said it like that. When was the last time your checking account surprised you? In a good way. Most checking accounts just kind of exist. They hold your money, they judge your impulse purchases. That's about it. West Shore Bank thinks that your checking account should pull a little more of its weight, right? Their Shoreline High Yield Checking gives you the opportunity to earn more on the money you're already using every single day. Or if you're spending money anyway, and let's be honest, groceries aren't getting any cheaper, their Shoreline Cash Back Checking lets you earn cash back on everyday debit card purchases. Both accounts come with convenient digital banking, easy access to your money, and the kind of personal service that only comes from a community bank that's been serving Northern Michigan for generations. So if your checking account has been doing the bare minimum, maybe it's time for an upgrade. Stop by your local West Shore Bank branch or visit westshorebank.com to learn more. West Shore Bank, community banking with modern solutions. Terms, conditions, and qualifications apply. Third-party data rates may apply. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. All right, and we are back. Let's go to Garfield Township. That's my home township.
Yeah.
And yeah, people filled up the township hall talking about data centers.
Yeah, data center. I think I do think I say it both ways, which is funny. I probably will say it both ways when I talk about it. Maybe it depends on what word is after it.
I know. It's really, it's hard to, I'm like, data? When I say data, though, I think of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah.
And that he was data. And then this is data.
We'll just say both are right. But you're right. Regardless, it's definitely a topic that people have very strong opinions about. When the Garfield Township Planning Commission met earlier this month, there was, I think, well over 100 people at the meeting. They were overflowing from the meeting room down into the outside hallway and lobby. Because at that meeting earlier this month, the township was discussing a process, a zoning update, which would just establish a process for enacting temporary moratorium. So they didn't really have a process before to pass a moratorium. So before they could even consider any kind of specific moratorium, say one on data centers,
right,
they had to get a process for having moratoriums. So that was what the board was discussing. The Planning Commission did approve that zoning change and send it to township trustees. They will have a public hearing on that coming up on August 11th. So if they approve that change that night, now the township will have a process for moratoriums.
Okay.
Once that process is in place, they can consider passing a specific moratorium on data centers. And the reason they want to do that is not to outright ban them, which I know some people would like to see, but I just want to point out is typically very difficult for communities to just ban uses. Mm-hmm. They often end up in court when they do that. The more common legally allowed approach is to regulate them. Okay. Where they can go, what the criteria are for them getting approved, what kind of zoning districts they're allowed to be in, what their size are, all those things. But Garfield Township doesn't really in its zone, and this is true for many communities who are dealing with this right now. This is a sort of emerging use. You know, the data, especially the hyperscale, like Facebook campuses we're thinking of, is pretty new. And so many zoning codes don't have rules to address them properly. When they talked about data centers in their zoning code in the past, they talked about typically like a TCAPS data center, like a little computer, you know, with servers. It's not
like a place that has your servers. Yeah, not like what we think of now.
Sabin, there's a Sabin data center on Cass Road. So that is different than often like what we're thinking of data centers now, where it's like a mega campus or what they're called hyperscale data centers. So what is going to be happening next in Garfield Township is, again, this August 11th public hearing. They'll get this process in place. And then it does sound like pretty quickly, the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to have a moratorium on data centers to the Township Board. Okay. That moratorium, under the language of the new process, can be up to a year. Oh. So that gives, because it takes a lot of time to update data zoning code. Yeah. You have to go through multiple steps. You also have to go through public hearings at multiple levels. It takes time. It also allows for, if it comes up to the year deadline and they haven't gotten the changes quite right, there can be 1 6-month extension. So potentially up to 18 months. Okay. There could be a moratorium on data centers. During that time, they will be actively looking at all of the concerns that they might have with data centers and deciding all of these things. You know, do we want them? Right now, they are use by right in 2 different industrial districts. Under a zoning update, they could change that, say, just to 1 zoning district. They could define different sizes. So maybe if you're a hyperscale, huge campus, there's different rules than if you're a small Sabin TCAPS data center, for example. So they're going to be looking at all of those rules. What's interesting is in the meantime, there is a smaller scale data center that has been proposed.
I remember us talking about this.
So in a June meeting, a developer from Illinois, Tom Cervenka, spoke during public comment. It was an official agenda item. He just spoke during public comment because he knew there was this discussion about a moratorium coming. And he said his company is looking at bringing what he described as a low intensity data center to Garfield Township. At the time, I couldn't reach him for an interview. We didn't know exactly where it was. We knew it was by a Light and Power substation because he said that. And then Light and Power told us it was near Cass Road. So since that time, they did submit an official application for the project, which we obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. So I have a copy of the application. It is planned for 2 parcels on Cybrant Road, which is off of Cass near the Sara Lee plant.
Yeah.
So those are properties owned by the Tentcraft folks, the Bullocks, I believe.
Yes.
So there's an existing building there. The application is, I think is trying to address public concerns of people thinking of like the huge data center that's proposed for Kalkaska County. The application says, look, we are just reusing this existing building that's on the property. We're not expanding the footprint of the property. The site is relatively small. It's about 3.5 acres. We're not talking about, 40, 50 acres like some of the big properties are. They did say in the application that they will not need any water upgrades, that they will not be using water for cooling purposes, which is a main concern of big data centers. They did say that they would be, essentially screening for sight and sound impacts. They use the word low impact again. However, the problem with this application, and I think they were likely, my guess is this is just a hunch on the timing. They are aware of the moratorium because they came and spoke during public comment about it. They are probably feeling some concern about this 12 to 18 month delay in their project and are trying to get it in. However, the application that they submitted lacks a lot of information that is required for a site plan review. So they did not have detailed engineering or landscaping or lighting plans. Those are all things that are very common that I see in a site plan and that the township requires. They sort of said, we're just submitting this so we can make sure like you give us a land use approval. And then before we start construction, we'll submit all that stuff to you. And John Syke, the township planning director, told me, no, that's not how that works. All of that information is required to be a complete application, and we cannot consider it for approval until it is complete.
So there's kind of a deadline looming here because if Garfield Township is going to be considering this moratorium, which it seems like they are, just to get more information and, to come up with their zoning rules, up to 18 months, they're just trying to get it in before they can do that.
I mean, likely, again, I did reach out to the developer again and was not able to get a hold of them for comment for the story, at least as of our recording today. The story is going to be coming out on Friday. We just wrote it today. But yes, so I can't confirm that. But that seems likely when if you're working on a project that a moratorium is coming, then often I have seen that before where they try to accelerate and get it in. If the moratorium goes into effect, it will stop any processing of data center applications, even ones that have been submitted. So if it hasn't been approved and it's in limbo, it will remain unconsidered until the moratorium is done. So again, that could be up to 18 months.
But if they were able to get it all approved, get it in, first of all, the application, a complete application in, then that would force the township, would it be the township board to have to consider it?
Yes, and as a use by right, typically that would be an administrative review. So staff would review it first, and then depending on what kind of site plan it is, it typically would go to the planning commission for a site plan review, and that board would approve it. One of the things that they want to change in this process is not making it a use by right anymore, but making it a special use permit, which is a more intensive approval process that does then often typically go to the township board in addition to the planning commission. It adds more steps. So if the data center can't get in time, which it seems like it's facing a pretty tight timeline right now, because even if they were to submit all of this stuff, first of all, it takes a lot of time to put engineering plans together, which I think is why they were trying to see if they could get around that. If they can't get all those plans together, then the moratorium will go into effect. And even if they could, there's still a schedule of when the Planning Commission would look at these things, and it's likely, that the Planning Commission can get to the moratorium first.
Do you know of other local townships that are taking up this very issue because of the prevalence of data centers? I'm thinking about Blair Township, Green Lake Township, other neighboring townships that are like, we might want to look into this.
Yeah, it's definitely a discussion across the state. I know specifically in our area, East Bay Township has had the exact same conversations and even has had some conversations with Garfield about the language. They're doing a sort of similar thing where they're looking at updating their township zoning code to address data centers. There's been discussions about, statewide rules for them. It's just kind of a new frontier.
Yeah, it feels a little wild, wild west.
It is. And it's really because of how quickly that they have emerged and how fast development companies like Meta and Google and Facebook and all these companies Microsoft are moving towards data centers that communities are scrambling to catch up, and a lot of planning is happening across the state to try to just, again, it's difficult to outright ban them, but the goal is to have a robust zoning ordinance that contemplates them and regulates them.
To me, I'm wondering too, because, as you wrote in your story, this is considered a, quote, small scale operation. Do the folks, the regular everyday citizens, do they really understand the difference?
I don't think they do. And it does not to say, and it's not to say that it's not anyone's fault or an issue of being ignorant. And some people do. But I would say the majority of the public, and this will be part of the learning process for us all, it's new as a reporter too, is that I think we have to be careful about being overreactive to the term data center, particularly because, as we talked about, like the Sabin data center, we have a few. We have examples of just by the traditional definition of a place that houses computer servers or software. Not every data center is going to be the same size. Now, I will say, in fairness to detractors of data centers, that the township staff said this week, even small data centers can have impacts. There can be noise. There can be these water and energy concerns. And so it's fair to look at that at every size.
You should.
Yes. And that's what the zoning plans to do. And maybe we'll even have different categories depending on how big they are. So even small data centers can have impacts. But it is fair to maybe understand that they can vary in scope and to look when we do have rules in place in a community, they will have to be reviewed individually because they are so different from project to project. And
also, as you said at the top of the story, it's very difficult to just outright ban something.
Yes.
That is not something that usually passes. And if you do ban something, get ready to go to court.
Correct. Yes. Because the idea being that, let's say in our era of high tech needs where we all have computers in our phones and our pockets all the time, and that there's some argument that maybe some degree of data centers are needed to keep up with the tech demands of the country. If you can demonstrate a need for a land use, you typically cannot prohibit it because it's like saying, otherwise at some point we have to put them somewhere.
Right.
So that's why it's difficult to ban, but you can regulate, or as we've done with like marijuana, for example, sometimes you can go around that and have like a ballot proposal where the people of the state put something in the Constitution or in a local charter.
Right.
But that's a whole other legislative issue.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe we will, walk down that road.
It's possible that could be something that happens as well.
Well, that's some good reporting. Good job. I guess we'll just wait and see.
We'll keep following it, yeah. Again, the next step will be that August 11th hearing and then the continued discussion about actually getting a moratorium in place.
All right. Well, before we say goodbye, let's talk about what we're excited about this week. And I know we've got a couple of shared things.
Yeah. Yes.
What are you excited about this week?
Well, tonight, Friday, when the episode is coming out, we're all going, I think, with some friends to see Jason Isbell at Interlaken, which I'm really excited about.
I love him.
And it'll be my first time in the new Roundabout.
Oh, you haven't done it.
I've really avoided
Yeah.
the 31 area. No offense to, and I know the businesses have struggled out there, but it's just, I haven't needed to go out that way. So I haven't. I live on the complete opposite end of town, but we'll be going to the show, which I think is going to be great.
Yeah.
And then you have something this weekend also, right?
I do. I'm going to be moderating NMC's History Day. This is an event that's happening on Saturday. So tomorrow, if you're listening when the show comes out on Friday, July 25th, it starts at 10 o'clock at Milligan. And there's a panel discussion where we're bringing in some former presidents, former, I just call them like leaders of NMC. And we're going to, talk about how things have been since they retired and, what things were like during their tenure. NMC is celebrating 75 years this year.
I know, I'm so proud.
I had a separate conversation on our sister podcast, The Conversation, with Steven Siciliano. And I have always heard the lore of NMC basically being like Les Biederman and some other dudes got together at Round's restaurant and said, hey, we need a college. And then they made it happen.
Yeah.
Which is, when I said that to Steven, he's like, yeah, that's what happened. I was like, what? That's amazing. Like, can you just imagine? I mean, yes, I love that people can still do that, but like, that was the deal. That's how things got done in 1951, It was just like, all right, who's got money? Okay, who wants to bring a college? Okay. I just kind of love it.
Yeah, so it's a different time.
Yeah, so that starts at 10 o'clock. There's a lot of stuff happening for History Day at NMC. There's concerts that night. There's a history walk. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, so please come. It's free, and there's a movie.
That's amazing. That sounds great. And the other thing I was just going to do a quick plug for this coming week is on Wednesday at the Bay Theater. We've been doing these summer pop-up events. We had one just this past week with Full Tilt Comedy, which was fantastic.
Yes.
We had a huge crowd. It was great turnout, really fun. We're doing another pop-up on Wednesday at 8 o'clock with the band Sturts, which has been featured on All Things Considered on NPR. They're a beautiful, like quartet kind of folk, acoustic, lovely band. 8 o'clock at the Bay. Doors open at 7, $15.
Love it.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one.
I'm leaving all of our listeners and viewers right now with a question because we were having this conversation, I think, a couple of days ago, maybe last night. I don't know. Everything's blurring together. We were talking about best movie sequels.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about this, and because you are a Jaws fan.
It's my favorite movie of all time.
And you said you just watched Jaws 2.
Yeah, and it was a notable drop-off from Jaws, my favorite movie of all time, to what I probably did not crack the top 500 movies.
And I do think that there are movie sequels where actually the sequel is better than the original.
I mean, the classic example, people say Godfather. Even if you prefer Godfather 1, people always say Godfather. Or Terminator.
I would say.
Aliens is another one.
Dark Knight.
Yes.
Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
My favorite Star Wars.
Yeah.
Aliens is a good one. Judgment Day was definitely better than Terminator 1.
Yeah.
100%.
2 is great.
Also, people have said, like Toy Story 2.
Yeah.
People like
some of the
that.
Toy Story sequels are all pretty great.
We'd love for you to reach out to us and tell us what you think. What was the best sequel? What sequel is the best sequel of all time?
Tell us the sequels, and if you've seen, it's too late. I'm down the rabbit hole. I'm going to go down with the Titanic. I'm going to see all the other Jaws here, and sadly, I'm sure each one will be a little more worse than the last.
Do they keep just electing that same mayor?
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite. I was mentioning one of my favorite memes of all time is a picture of the mayor, and it says the mayor from Jaws is the same mayor Jaws 2, and this is why it's important to vote in your local elections.
I mean, that mayor and Jaws might as well just like run together.
I know.
At some point.
But if you have a favorite Jaws sequel, tell me that too, because I am going to watch them all, but I'm curious if there's any ones that even come close to the original.
We're talking sequels, and you know what? Maybe we'll get some reaction next week on the podcast. Thank you all for listening, and thanks to Beth Milligan for another great episode of Currently. Be sure to subscribe to the show on all the platforms. You can do that very easily at crystalfrost.com. Follow us on social media. We're everywhere. Subscribe to Currently with Crystal Frost wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch the full show on YouTube and on Facebook. Currently is a Compass Local podcast produced by the wonderful Pancake Boy Productions in downtown Traverse City. Big thanks to our lead supporter, West Shore Bank. Start saving today at westshorebank.com. We will see you next week.